Hello, and welcome to New Dance Craze on Soho Radio. I'm Jocelyn Campbell, and today joining me is a very special guest, the composer, conductor, ensemble leader, modular synth aficionado, wearer of many hats, the multifaceted, wickedly talented, the complex Aaron Holloway-Nahum. Aaron, hello.
Hi, Joss. Nice to be here.
Fabulous. Great to have you, and thanks for coming on. So, the subject of this show stems from a text that you sent me a while back while you were at a concert, which, while delightful and moving, as you expressed, contained, I think it was, 8 new pieces, world premieres?
Well, we were at a festival.
A festival.
So we'd seen, dozens.
Dozens of new pieces, and every single one of which was extremely slow and dreamy.
Yeah.
Which led to a series of questions of who is writing fast music these days? Why does it seem to be such a rarity these days in the field of concert music, fast music? And what even constitutes fast music anyway?
Yeah, it was this experience of kind of like hearing one piece, and it's kind of like, when you start paying attention to a thing, and then you're like, I'm just gagging for some fast music, and then the next thing happens, you just think, oh my God, is anyone ever? And when's the last time I heard something fast?
Yeah, why are there no points of contrast in a program that should be all over the place? You know, it's 12 different composers, all sorts of stuff going on, and yet somehow a consensus has been reached that slow, subtle, languid, serpentine, airy, dreamlike music seems to be not the total norm. You can still find exceptions to it, but there are a lot of places where that has become something of a lingua franca. And I must say that, we're a little guilty of contributing to the landscape. In my concert music, I don't think I've written anything above quaver equals 83 in about 2 decades.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I think the thing is that you very quickly get to is that also, even, of course, in this festival, there were pieces that had, let's say, fast tempo markings, but they still don't feel fast. There is something missing where even music that has speed seems to collapse into texture and stasis. Like everything is surface level activity, which is not really the same thing. And
nothing is structurally fast.
Yeah.
A fast BPM is, well, in genre music, let's say in pop music, there are a lot of genres which are almost by definition fast. I think, like, if you look at extreme forms of metal or extreme forms of dance music, I'm tempted to open the show with "You Suffer" by Napalm Death, which is about, it's 1.5 seconds long. We could play it now. Let's play it now. Fabulous. Grindcore as a genre itself has a predisposition towards speed as a primary concern for it as a music. And the same is true of certain genres of hardcore, both hardcore punk, hardcore dance music, that the speed of the beat, either in the BPM or in the subdivisions of the BPM, the blast beat, all of these ideas they are hard embedded into the notion of the genre itself. And I think, drum and bass and jungle is another one, like very fast, very active, like rhythmic patterns. And the speed in those types of music is often governed by the BPM. That you have a kind of pure one-to-one relationship between BPM speed and the sense of speed. Whereas with concert music, it's a bit more difficult to pin down, because in concert music you often expect tempo shifts, but you can have a very fast tempo happening, but with very little structural change, I think, as you were alluding to. Or you can have harmonic stasis or textural stasis while something is very rapidly unfolding. But it doesn't feel fast. It doesn't feel like things are changing. It doesn't feel like things are dynamic.
But I was thinking about this, because we were talking about this, weren't we, after the concert the other day? And I was thinking a lot about it, because I think you're absolutely right that in a lot of this dance music and these kinds of genres, you get music that is fast, but I'm not sure that music has a faster rate of change necessarily than some of the music we're talking about. What I think it has, I could be wrong about this, but the thing that I keep coming back to is that it has hierarchy and repetition in the rhythm. So you have, like, okay, we are in 4/4, and the downbeat is the most important beat, and it comes every 4 beats. Whereas so often in contemporary music, especially once it gets moving quickly, it's like, okay, now I'm going to change meter every bar. So we were thinking, we were performing this piece by Alex Paxton, and this is kind of an infamous thing about Alex's music, which makes it very difficult and fiendishly hard to play, right? Like over a long scale of time. You play a stretch of it, you feel like you've sprinted for, however, like for miles and miles. But sometimes when you listen to it, because the pulse is shifting all of the time and unsettling you all of the time, if you reach a point, I'm not sure, I think Alex's music actually is fast on many occasions, but one of the things that happens, say in like new complexity is that this tips over to a point where it's just beyond, it just becomes a stream.
Yes.
And you just kind of, without the hierarchy, without understanding, this is because the thing I think about that, like that 4/4 bar, let's say, is you can feel the speed of that.
Yes.
So you feel the quaver, you feel the crotchet, you feel the bar, you feel the phrase.
I think one of the reasons why Alex's music does feel fast in a way that a lot of other composers who are writing music today doesn't, is because his music has a sense of pace, quickening and slowing down from a frenetic sensibility. By that I mean, because there's in the piece that you performed, which I heard, which was wonderful, Shrimp Bit Babyface, there's a lot of samples of bits of music happening in the electronics which are being sped up or slowed down or have the kind of tape player chipmunk voice in them. And I think that in Alex's music, like, speed is in service of exuberance. Everything is supposed to be explosive and joyous and exuberant, and what better way to make you feel those feelings than to feel breathless, to feel like hurried, to feel rushed, to feel like nothing has time to stick around and linger because it's moving by so rapidly. And that isn't to say that there aren't moments in Shrimp Bit Babyface that don't feel like there is a sort of chaotic stasis where there's so much stuff happening, there's so much dynamism that it forms texture. And that texture actually becomes kind of monolithic. And it slightly depends on what level you're listening to it at. But when you start listening to the layers, when you listen to the fact that there's a violin sort of soloing frenetically behind a set of the wind and brass who are doing quite fast shifting block chords, and then there's all this electronic detritus going on, there's a rapid rate of change, there's a lot of notes, there's a lot of stuff happening, and there are moments where you have genuinely fast BPMs and fast rhythmic activity, sort of accelerating and decelerating in these big chunks.
Yeah, and they're perceivable chunks.
Yes.
Alex's music, something about it is that you never have the feel. At least I never have the feeling that I could just rebeam it. It's like if it's 5/8, 7/8, 2/4, 3/8, whatever it is. It feels like it has to, like, no, this is what it has to be. You can't, this infamous Heroic Motives article where the RJD Quartet are playing Fernio and they're like, well, we just we rebeam it in 3/4 and we just play slightly different tempi. This you couldn't do with Alex's music because if it's in 5/8, it's because it's 3+2, and then he's very literate of the rhythms and musical feelings that he's evoking. It's just that they're so stacked on top of each other that there is a sense of frenzy about it. Yeah, and the interesting thing there is I'm much more experienced with his music as a performer than as a listener.
Yes.
And this is extremely different, right? Because you can have one understanding of a music when you perform it, but to listen to it, you just hear it very differently. Also, when you conduct it, of course, because in Alex's music, you're counting so hard when you're conducting it. So,
well, maybe this gives us quite a good opportunity to. I think the comparison has already been made, but maybe we should play Alex Paxton's Shrimp Bit Babyface. And follow it up with a bit of British New Complexity for the sake of contrast, and perhaps our listeners can decide what's faster. I won't play any Fernio, I think, because, well, Fernio's music often has incredibly slow tempi and then an enormous amount of activity set into it. But I think I have found an example from the world of, let's say, exuberantly notated British music of the 1970s that really does have a sense of meaningful speed and pace to it. And this is the solo piano work by Michael Finnissy, All.Fall.Down.
Oh, great.
Which is a very, very, very fast cataclysm of notes, spiraling and spiraling. It loses momentum, it reaches inertia. It has a very slow ending, but the opening few minutes are extraordinarily fast, I would say.
CRAZE.
yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? Because here, what you feel in this Finnissy is it's like the length of it's not even the phrase. It's like the I don't know what the grammatical thing I want to say is, but the unit, it's not a motive, but it's like the length of the inner heart pulse.
The cycle, but that's not the right word either. The incarnation of whatever the material is.
Yeah.
You hear it being pulled and pushed, and maybe the music for solo piano is better suited for. In some ways, for the deployment of speed.
Yeah.
I think there are certainly on my long list of pieces that I thought we might play on the show at some point. There's a good few piano pieces ranging from Scarlatti to Ligeti.
Or Gillespie. I mean, this piece makes me think. For some reason, I have the Gillespie North American ballads.
Right.
In my ear.
But there's something that the solo piano can deploy. In terms of speed, where you can, if you have a performer right on the edge, you can get a sense of things being just about to collapse or going so fast that they're existing on a knife edge, and that is important in the sense of in terms of speed or communicating the idea of pace or fast music.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean. It's probably also not for nothing that the piano can handle so many elements of music at once, by which I mean it can do harmony with itself and then shift, and then, with the pedal, the performer has control over not just the harmony of a given moment, but the harmony of a phrase or where something clears or doesn't clear.
Yes.
Yes,
the pedal seems to make things slower in a way. It's goo.
Yeah, of course, yeah, because also we have a very different, don't we, experience of speed based on articulation.
Yeah.
So if everything, like the harpsichord, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Suddenly I have the feeling that all harpsichord music is at the same speed, but that can't be right.
That's certainly not right.
That's certainly not the case. But I think that's how it feels when you think about the articulation of the instrument, when you think about the sound of the instrument.
Yeah, and probably the way to get the most dynamic music on a harpsichord is to add more notes, because it doesn't sustain in the same way as a piano, and it has decay, and it doesn't have the same kind of articulation, or it has a more mechanical articulation. So
it doesn't have the variety of articulation that a piano can have.
Exactly, and then I suppose in order to express with it as an instrument, you need to do more in the pure compositional process of like notes and rhythms to get across your musical ideas. But I mean, having said that, there are fast movements and slow movements in the Brandenburgs, for example.
Of course, yeah.
Which the slow movements have real pathos and real solemnity and poise and restraint, and the fast movements have glee and gaiety and abandon and a lot of notes.
Yeah, I mean. shouldn't have said that. I could just imagine the angry emails I'm going to get from harpsichord players.
Don't worry, no one's listening.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes me think, though, this piece about, we have tempo, but we also have kind of like geology and like form in music. And it really feels here what you feel in this Finnissy is the rate of change.
Yes.
It's not, it doesn't feel fast when it starts, but then when this thing starts to collapse, you really feel like you're going forward.
Yeah, it really feels like it's on the edge, and you really feel like you've got momentum. Yeah. And I think that it starts out feeling like you're getting cycles, so the pace actually feels a bit slower, but then particularly when it starts compressing and the rate of notes shifts up a gear, you have a sense of being physically pulled along by the music itself, of the feeling of accelerating in a car where you go back into your seat and you go like the being kicked on.
Yeah. It has to do with expectation, doesn't it?
Yes, it must do.
It's very quick in this Finnissy that you start to expect where it comes. So when it is short of, this is the thing that gives you this feeling of movement, in the same way that you have a way that you feel when you're standing upright.
But I think that's the thing that's so musical about Finnissy, for all of his notational extravagances and all of his enormity of kind of maximalism. There is such a musical ear behind it at all times, at all costs, that his music always sounds the way he wants it to. But I also think it always sounds the way he wants it to, but he has an incredibly broad and diverse ear that wants to hear a lot of things. And I think that's why I feel so drawn to it. Or I think maybe that's why, certainly for this conversation, it's probably the best example of music that is, inside of the catchment of the sort of British New Complexity.
It feels like music, like sometimes you hear a piece. Actually, I think it's a lot about your music, Joss, that you hear music and you think it's like the composer is physically in contact with the music. And this is a quality that I really love. You hear a lot of music. It feels like, I also don't mean it to actually sound quite so negative, positive, like it's always good or always bad. But you do hear and experience a lot of music, especially when you're, working a lot with students and giving a lot of premieres, where it feels like the music is almost like it's just ephemeral, or it's dots on a page, or it's just flying by and no one's been in touch with it.
Yes.
And then you feel like there's music, it actually goes beyond hearing it. It's not just like the thing about, because there's lots of composers, I think you could say, they hear the music really well, but then it's another level if they really are physically in touch with it, and you feel like there's enough space in the tempo and in every bar and in every gesture for the music to exist and speak.
Yes.
And this kind of imbues it with a quality that is exciting and has speed somehow.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much for saying so about my music. I think one of the reasons why I don't use a lot of fast tempos or don't do a lot of rapid things in my music is because the process of composition and the kind of physical embodiment of being inside the music and hearing it and sculpting it exactly as you want to hear it is one that feels so slow and expansive. And that almost sort of by definition seems to disqualify my music from being able to kind of compete in the same.
But that's interesting. I wonder if that is a quality of. And I literally had not, in all the discussions we've had about it, hadn't thought about that. But look, I'm not a producer. I don't make this dance music or anything like. But it does have the feeling. You'll hear somebody like, oh yeah, I wrote that song in 15 minutes, or I wrote this thing in 10 minutes, or I downloaded that beat from Splice and it was done. When you're spending 2 hours writing a bar, to really and I'm not sure. Again, I'm not so like. I'm not a lecturer on these things, but I don't have the feeling that, of course they wrote and revised things, but I don't think it took Beethoven 2 hours to write a bar of music.
Yeah, probably not, right?
It doesn't have that feel. At least it doesn't feel that way, does it? It feels like he may have spent.
But it's like the sort of 2 hours of agonising for Beethoven happens sort of before the notes are on the page.
Yeah.
In a way. To me, my imagination of
I'm sure it took him weeks to write a melody.
There's something about there's something that feels like there's a kind of ferocious process of coming up with an idea and then rewriting it in your head or at the keyboard or however one writes music until it's utterly perfect, until the harmony is just right, until it does absolutely everything. But it's sort of, it happens before dots go on the page somehow. It's the internal workings of the mind that are the cliched 10,000 hours of doing an activity before one can master it.
Yeah. But now you have the feeling that for almost every composer, students right on up, that there is this hours and hours of work spent on each and every bar, and the bars then, as you kind of describe it, they have a certain space to them, and I don't know. They don't have that speed. They don't.
Yes. Yeah, there's an elongation to the. It also, I think there must be something to do with the fact that the most relevant influences in the current sort of crop of modern music that I see sort of day in day out tend to be from the world of kind of expansive slow music.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of composers that are influenced, myself included, by Morton Feldman. I think Feldman has really staked a claim to the imaginations of a lot of different composers younger than him who came after.
Which is interesting, because I think 20 years ago when I was studying, you wouldn't have guessed that.
Maybe not. Maybe you wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, he really hit me at uni, I have to say. But I mean, that's the opposite of fast music. He wrote crotchet equals 63. After he found that tempo, he wrote crotchet equals 60 to 63 for the rest of his life.
Right.
and he wrote pieces which were 6 hours long. Like
he basically wants. He doesn't want time to exist.
Yes, he wants flat time.
Flat time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I hear a lot of Arvo Pärt in the works of a lot of composers at the moment, which is an Arvo Pärt late works, not kind of screaming Schnitger-esque early, bonkers Arvo Pärt, but tintinnabuli, beautiful, tolling bells, chiming, wholly minimalist sort of Arvo Pärt. And Steve Reich, but Steve Reich in a sense has fast tempos, but almost never has fast music.
Yeah, again, this is exactly this question, isn't it?
There's a difference between like conveyor belt music, music where you are hypnotized by the constant passing of material that may go by very fast, but it's the actual structure is much more sort of slow. And in fact, maybe this is something to play next, but maybe the one example of minimalism that really seems to understand speed is John Adams.
Yeah, Short Ride in a Fast Machine, right?
And Short Ride in a Fast Machine is kind of interesting because the pulse pulse tempo is only 152. So it doesn't even break drum and bass.
Yeah. Come on, John.
It's not jungle.
Yeah.
But it's what he's doing with the dynamism of rhythms in that, and the ecstasy of the orchestra. These rapid arpeggios on the strings, these amazing syncopations in the brass, being offset by that the constant hammering of that woodblock, and everything essentially. It's like deconstructing a tempo and doing everything you possibly can in terms of subdivisions, offsetting beats, stressing accents, syncopations, just everything in a rapid deluge.
Yeah.
in our journey to discover the essence of fast music, perhaps we should talk about some composers from the world of modern music who have written conclusively fast music.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think we're both agreed on one, and that's Pierre Boulez.
Yeah.
The toccata is a big form for him, and somehow he manages to push past the notion of just material, lots of material happening, and get to a sense where structural changes are occurring very rapidly and within a rhythmic framework which is flying by at speed.
Yeah. Yeah, he's such an interesting example, isn't he? Because I think that he's at his fastest when the music is viscerally fast in how it changes, and that he often needs, like, I find notation so much faster than I find the piano or the orchestral version so much fast, because he can change color and light so quickly, and orchestration so rapidly, and this adds quite a lot to it, where a lot of times he also, for me, sits on the edge of a composer where sometimes things go by so quickly, or you know, the rows are coming so fast that it just flat to my ear. There's just this point where my ear goes flat and I just can no longer follow it, and it becomes a stream.
Yes, but even when his music or his toccatas do become a stream, sort of like harmonically, I think I took the first sonata to pieces in my master's at King's for a musicology module. I did an analysis essay on the first sonata, and I essentially figured out what was going on. It's a principle of it's rather than it being tone rows, it's a principle of chromatic enclosure from an interval. So he'll give you an exploded kind of perfect fourth, for example, or a minor sixth or something, and then he will move chromatically inwards to the central point of that interval, with every note displaced by the
seven
octaves.
octaves.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on, and then there's a lot of sort of 12-note aggregates. But there's a point where you get a very fast semi-quaver toccata where there's about 12 chromatic pitches going by in the space of a single bar. So harmonically speaking, it's saturated, it's dense, but there's something about the rate of change and the rhythmic velocity which somehow gets a sense of propulsion. And I think it's often what he's doing. When the piano music, it's sort of what he's doing with the hands. It's what we were
saying about piano music, isn't it? Somehow in piano music you can generate this this force,
this vigor. That if you can put someone that's right on the edge of what they're capable of doing. I think that's what makes the notation for orchestra and the notation for piano such an interesting case study in the perception of speed. Is that is it number 2?
Yeah, they have different numbers, which doesn't.
But we should play those back to back and see.
That would be great, actually.
And we'll see which people think is faster. will say the last time I saw the Notation live, the orchestral versions, it was at the Barbican. I was up in the circle, looking down on the orchestra, and it's so densely notated that looking at having the entire visual of the whole orchestra and just seeing everyone hammering away from front to back, from as soon as the movement starts, everyone is going hammer and tongs. You can see bows going left and right. You can see percussion sticks just flying up and down. Wind instruments sort of like bobbing with the force of the breath going through them. Everything is moving. Yeah. From the word go until it stops, and that is a short ride in a fast machine. Right.
What about the Anna Meredith that you heard at the concert?
Yeah, well, I think that.
This is Brisk Widow, by the way, for listeners who weren't at the concert.
Yes, of course. The problem with that, in terms of sheer speed, is that it slightly falls into the trap of what we've been talking about before, and not that it's trying to be really fast, but if it is fast, it's sort of fast in a kind of pop music-y kind of way. Yeah. But then when it's competing with pop music being fast, it's not nearly as fast as like hardcore dance music or grindcore or or sort of super up-tempo jungle. Yeah. And it does have. I'm actually finding this one really difficult to say whether it feels fast. There was a moment where it felt really fast.
I think that it comes. The experience of it is again about these like large. It doesn't. It starts with this pulse, which maybe feels fast in a contemporary music concert.
Yes.
When it starts, you're like, oh wow, but then it goes like this for its entire first. I think it's in 3 sections, and the first section is not fast,
but the end of the first section feels quite fast.
Starts to speed up.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there was something about it's diminishing bars. Yeah. It's diminishing
something's diminished. I mean, I've not done an analysis of the piece.
It's diminishing phrase lengths. I remember it's
Anna Meredith and Michael Finnissy.
There is a moment where the diminution of the phrase length starts to feel so frenzied and rapid that really got me, and that did feel like it was going by at an incredible pace. Then what it was doing in that regard stopped, and it started doing something else, and it sort of started from the beginning, and it never recovered the pace. Not that I think it's necessarily trying to, and this is a very strange metric by which to be judging music.
Yeah, exactly.
but I think that in terms of feeling like it's a fast piece of music, it feels like it's a fast piece of music for about 2 minutes at the end of the first third.
Okay. That's so interesting.
To me.
Yeah.
And then it never quite gets its pace back.
I mean, this is such an interesting thing. This perception of speed, it relies on entirely on not only what you are able to hear. Like, are you able to hear something like this? Although maybe in the Anna Meredith, I would say this is a little bit more observable than the Finnissy phrase lengths, if that makes sense.
Yes,
somebody.
It's infinitely more comprehensible as a listener on first listening. You can hear what's happening. It's willfully comprehensible.
Yeah, but it also then depends what you pay attention to.
Yes,
right. Like what you and what the music asks you to pay attention to. And there's a sense in this, the Anna Meredith piece, should say that it was written by Anna Meredith and Sam Wilson, actually, the two of them. But there's also this light show that goes, light show, but lights that go with it. And they physically speed up. Yes. And that visual things are maybe much easier to track.
Yes. Yeah, well, once that piece starts strobing at the end of its first third, then you feel like you're really in it. Yeah. Then it does feel like it does feel clubby. Yeah. It does feel exciting and intense, and like you're on the edge of something momentum wise. I would say that it would be hard to describe that as a fully fast piece of music, but through a couple of techniques, it manages to get fast for a couple of moments in a way that feels meaningful.
Yeah, and this is in contrast, I think, to the Reich.
Yes.
And minimalist analogy or minimalist music that you were bringing up, where there is no, it's this diminution of phrase length that just seems to seems to not exist.
I can't think of a piece of Steve Reich's that I would call fast.
I'm desperately trying now, but
even sort of something like Electric Counterpoint. It doesn't. Like there's stuff with a lot of, there are things with fast arpeggios in, but they almost immediately become slow loops. I think the same is true of sort of Philip Glass to some extent. No, Philip Glass has faster stuff because he will he will ratchet up a tempo, and suddenly you'll go from do 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 to. But I suppose you're only ever getting a kind of leap of speed and then adjusting to a new normal.
Yeah. tell you a piece that, I mean, I haven't really thought about it in this exact context, but it was some years ago we played it, and it was, to this day, I think the most powerful experience I've had on a stage. It's a piece called 11 Years of Pleasure by Jonah Haven.
Great title.
Yeah, great title. And the piece is quite interesting because I don't actually remember the actual lengths now, but the first kind of 2 minutes or 3 minutes, I remember it is very short. Maybe it's a bit longer than that, but the first kind of 2 or 3 minutes is kind of a standard new music piece. Some noises, some things happen, it kind of floats along. And then 2 or 3 minutes in, these chords start in the piano. And I mean, I can't remember who Jonah says they are. Maybe he says they're like Radiohead or something, but I think they're Joni Mitchell chords. They just sound like Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
And the tempo is very slow. Again, I can't remember the exact tempo, but say it's like crotchet equals 40. And then over the course of 8 minutes, the tempo ramps more or less continuously from crotchet 40 up to like 200 something.
Blimey.
But the chords stretch underneath.
Oh!
So the chords are always the same length. The chords don't move. And the physical experience of that, of like by the end of it as a conductor, you're really, and it was true for all the musicians because they all playing these things that speed up except for the pianist. You feel so physically like all this movement.
Yeah.
But these chords float. It's an extraordinary piece. I mean, really.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, we should play it.
We should play it. But this begs the question, what's the difference in the perception of speed for the performer and the listener?
Yeah.
Which, we've done a little bit of research on this. Another name that sort of came up when we were planning this show, or planning this discussion, was Bryn Harrison. Mm-hmm. I think their music has an awful lot of movement, an awful lot of surface form movement.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could argue that.
Yeah, glittering, glistening, very, very twinkling, rapid sort of ripples of sound happening constantly, absolutely constantly, but very, very, very long form, slow repetitions. In a similar way to what we said about Feldman earlier, like time is flattened, time doesn't exist, time goes beyond what your short-term memory is really capable of dealing with in the context of of sitting down and listening to a piece of music.
Yeah.
However, unlike Feldman, every single note or every pitch or sound is rushing to get to the next place, is constantly flickering. And this, to me, seems to pitch exactly halfway between being perceivable as fast music and being perceivable as glacially slow music.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, until these discussions, it would never have occurred to me to try... Do you think... What I was going to say there is it would never have occurred to me to try and listen to Bryn's music as if it's fast music. Do you think you could do that? Do you think, like, as a listener, you can be like, right, I'm going to experience this as fast.
That would be almost an even more zen way of listening to it than slow.
Yeah.
Because when you listen to music that's slow, you sort of relax into it and you let it wash over you. But there's a sense of, as a listener, if you're listening to fast music, you're like, your ears are pricked up, you're paying attention, you're listening more, maybe not more actively, but or you're listening actively enough to perceive these changes which are happening with increased
I'm going to listen to a
rapidity.
40-minute piece by Bryn as if I'm watching like a car chase in the Bourne Ultimate. Yeah. Like, that's what I want to, that's how I want to listen.
Riveted.
Yeah.
I think it's doable. I think I must have at least listened to bits of his music like that. Particularly in there's music by him for his piano music, not Vessels. That does feel slower.
Yeah,
that does feel like a very slowly shifting piece of music, even though there can be kind of rapid notes and cycles and arpeggios. But
in a sense, it might be because it. I mean, I don't call it perfectly defined, but in a sense, it might be because it doesn't have this same timbral.
Yes. Well, there's the newer piece for two pianos, which feels like there's a lot of activity happening. Towards the Slowing of the Past, which then implies...
It's a perfect title for this.
Exactly. which implies a slowing down of material, which does start very, very rapid. It's a sort of barrage of notes for two pianos, highly chromatic and rhythmically all over the place. And then it periodically pauses, plays those passages backwards, and then restarts them. But I think with some sort of like long form process where things are getting further and further apart, or the memory of what you're hearing is slowing down somehow, in a quintessentially sort of Bryn Harrison way. But his piece for solo guitar, the first movement of that, again, it's rapid, regular arpeggios, which does feel like it has speed and propulsion, but when you realize as a listener you're hearing the same thing being presented over and over and over again, then your ear starts to slow down, and rather than tracing it sort of like you're hearing these repetitions of the same interval patterns over longer periods of time, and then longer periods of time and longer periods of time until it becomes this soup that you're in, this haze, fog, a musical fog of sort of rapid glittering.
music you can think of where the repetition makes it seem faster?
Yes, but I think when you're using repetition to make stuff seem faster, you have to know when to stop repeating the thing. And I think...
I guess the Anna Meredith is kind of like that.
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah. And I think that... well, this is where I'm going to invoke a different genre of music and talk about breakcore for a second.
Okay.
Because I think that Venetian Snares is a sort of master of subverting repetition in order to give you these kind of skippy sort of asymmetric repetitions that make fast tempos seem more dynamic as well. So rather than it just being a set of fast things looping over and over again, it will be an asymmetrically chopped groove repeating in a way that sort of has a wonky leg.
Yeah.
And if you can get a sense of how to repeat stuff dynamically, then the repetitions can aid in a sense of propulsion. And I think someone like Bernard Lang can do this in music like Differenz Wiederholung, where you can have 5 repeats of 1.5 beats, which is like a language of repetition like that can propel things forward, but you've got to know when it starts feeling too similar and jack it before it gets to that point and start on something new.
And this is the same thing we've been talking about, isn't it? Where that is the point where the ear kind of just gives up.
Yes.
or maybe where the ear, because the music is fast on a certain scale, but when you start to look at phrases where you like step back, it is no longer fast. If the ear, it's really this thing. It's like you're no longer watching a car chase. You kind of lean back in your chair and go, okay, well, I just let this wash over me a little bit more.
Yes.
I'm listening to slow music.
But then, I suppose then this becomes a kind of definitional kind of quagmire, right? That fast music is only fast when the listener is hearing it as fast music and not letting it wash over them.
Yeah, but it does feel... What did I hear the other day? There just is so much music in the classical repertoire in particular, maybe because of all the cues and because the hierarchy is so inbuilt and so ingrained. This is fast music.
Yes. This is a point that I wanted to bring up earlier, or that I thought of before we started talking with the mics on. And it is that it's almost... Fast music almost seems easier when concrete musical forms exist. Yeah. And I think Scarlatti has a much easier time of writing fast music. I think maybe Bach has a much easier time of writing fast music. Beethoven, when you have the form of a scherzo, of a fast movement of a piece, when the contrast isn't happening moment to moment internally, but is happening across movements because you have topics of discourse, or you have a set of conventions in the language of music that mean that you don't just plummet from a 200 BPM idea where the harmony is moving very fast to suddenly crotchet equals 40 and everything is moving by a kind of glacial pace. And I think that as things start to get sort of more sort of mushy and romantic, and these giant forms start to appear where the first movement of a big symphony is doing the entire gamut of emotions and all of the spectrum of anything that you could possibly like. There's every mode of listening in just the first movement of a Mahler symphony, for example. It's everything. It's truly maximalist. But if you go back to, and I think I'll probably play an interesting line of things to listen to over the last few minutes of what we've been talking about. If we play Scarlatti's Sonata K427, which I think the tempo marking is as fast as possible.
Oh, great!
It is, and it can be played right on the edge. Okay. It's absolutely riveting, and it's maybe the most unambiguous example of fast music that I could find. That I don't think it could be argued that this isn't a fast piece of music. That alongside the Venetian snares and maybe some a section of something from Bernard Lang's Differenz Wiederholung.
Sounds great.
Could be an interesting triptych to play.
Please stop hitting me.
Where's Bill? Where's Bill?
thing that I feel there is it's so joyful. Like it's so unapologetically sincere, sincerely joyful.
Yeah.
It's one thing. And that's the other thing is I think I can imagine, I can't really, I mean, it's such an amazing piece. I can almost imagine a contemporary composer writing this and having to lay on top of it dozens of things, timbral things and, extended techniques and all kinds of, because you couldn't just write this.
No, you can't write that. And therein lies the pain of sort of modernity and music making now, is that's not to say that you can't write something unambiguously joyful, and you couldn't write something that's not sort of monistically breathless and fast and.
I really want to try. I don't know if I could write something like that. I don't know if I could.
But the thing is like we live in such a different time period where the rules of engagement have changed so much.
Yeah.
It's that you wouldn't write something like that. The culture that produced that is dead.
Yeah.
And
also, it would feel naive at this exact moment, wouldn't it?
Well, but then if you were able to write something, but that's the thing, is that if you were able to write something that was like that and that good, then it wouldn't feel. Then
I could write something like that, but it wouldn't be anywhere near that good.
Like there are so many variables in sort of translating compositional intention across 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 mega generations of music.
Yeah.
The training that Scarlatti had, the musical ideas in his head, the technology that he had access to, the culture that music was, and the way that the terms of engagement with what music is manifested. We can't but produce contemporary music now. The rules are perhaps more open in that we can incorporate Scarlatti's music into our music knowingly.
I could play a recording of that piece in any one of my pieces.
We can sample it.
Yeah. You know what I think? I think to return to this thing, this like incredibly stupid thing I said earlier, that like it didn't take Beethoven a week to write a bar or whatever. in listening to this, I think what I meant, or what the feeling you have here is that, like, let's say, like, again, I just make up the numbers, but let's say that like 9 out of 10 notes he barely had to write. They're just there. But then it's like this thing that you trip on that makes the piece so him, and that's the thing that makes it joyful and fast. And the difficulty is, if as composers today, you have to pick every one of those 10 notes, if every single note has to be chosen, it's very difficult to like throw off like and then to get on to get going.
Yeah, we sort of compose music in an era where there are no givens.
Yeah, none.
There are no there's no that follows that, or like there are no sort of conventional truisms in
or even anything that could possibly be true that someone should think.
Yes. And if there are, they're contextually functional, and you've made up those rules. That if there's a logic in modern music, it's because you as the composer have invented the logic. And this was the great leap forward in the 20th century, the idea of contextual functionality. That is what brought us free atonality, serialism, and then the kind of the gamut of approaches to post-tonal music. And it's why I always find the body of work that is the post-war avant-garde this unbelievable kind of like impenetrable cathedral of hard work in a musical form, that people were inventing new ways to conceptualize pitch and harmony and rhythm, and using it for one piece, and then then never touching it ever again, and then rewriting the book for their next piece.
Or you've got Elliott Carter with his Book of Harmony now. You've got Lisa Streich just has released her Book of Chords. I mean, I'm not sure either of them write fast music, but
Carter's got some.
It's again. I was returning because we played it years and years ago. The double concerto.
Was that you?
At St. Luke's, that was us. Yeah. Were you at that gig?
Yes, I was.
Oh, fantastic! That was us.
It was so funny because my relationship with that piece has sort of 360'd, in that I found when I first heard it, because it took me a long time to like Carter. I had a real dislike for Carter, I think, because his version of spiky modernism felt somehow too bookish for me.
Yeah, you just got to stay in late Carter. And
and then it felt like harsh sounds with good taste. and like over and slightly overly so.
Oh my God. Wow.
That it was, for want of a better word, it was like
distraction. That's great.
It was a bit, it was a bit classical, like in a
harsh sounds with good taste. Oh my God!
I know, yeah.
Amazing. I love it.
Scathing,
and a new biography.
And I went to that concert slightly expecting to be sort of because I'd seen a piece by him that I really hated at the Proms, which was sort of like angular modernism with like no textural blending. Like it was like texturally deaf music. Right. It was all notes on the on the page and quite spiky ones at that. And that left me very cold. And
his music can have this exact opposite feeling to what we were talking about. Yes. It's like he's not in touch with any of it.
And then I went to what turned out to be you playing the double concerto, and I found it funny. I found it sort of almost so abject and like kind of brutal and like kind of club smashy, and kind of nasty, and like that I was actually laughing. I was under my breath with a hand over my mouth. I was sort of cackling.
Fantastic.
I was just like, I can't believe this. I can't believe anyone wrote something so abject and like and
I mean, we emphasize that because we played it right next to a piece by Molly Joyce as well. So this really does.
But years later, I came across a score which I perused through and bought and took home and listened to again, and I was like, oh, I was wrong about this. Oh, this is very, very, very good. And it was a lot deeper than I thought on first hearing, and it basically I don't find it funny anymore.
Okay.
Not that it doesn't have a sense of absurdity and a real sense of kind of brute force and power to it, but I'm completely at home in its sound world and what it's doing with the piano, the harpsichord, and the quite wild percussion and the groups of ensembles that are playing. And I really get it.
Yeah, sincerely. I mean, this tempo ramp in this piece is crazy. It's really so unbelievably elegant, and it works. It's I mean, I don't remember what the term, because it's not a shepherd tone, but it's whatever this thing is that constantly
it's something that's constantly rising but then falling kind of proportionally, so it like feels like a shepherd tone feels like it's getting higher, but it's not.
But this is this thing that always feels like it's getting faster.
Yes.
For the last whatever, until it gets to the crazy.
I suppose because everything is almost written sort of everything is written as like an exponential gesture.
Yeah,
right?
but he actually has. I don't think I have the score here, but he does actually have this this accelerando in that piece that goes from whatever it is. It's like 72 to 144, and then it drops by half. And then it does it again. But you have these things that just keep going and keep speeding up away from you.
And then within that sort of shepherd tone of tempo, you have gestures of sort of like, it's all semiquavers with like straight quintuplet, sextuplet,
exactly,
and that feels dynamic in a very real sense, in a very visceral sense.
Yeah, and you really feel that. You really feel this happen because of the percussion, because they really play it. these things, of course, they don't preclude it. Of course, I do believe there is fast music out there. But
I think the fast music that's out there, the composer I can think of making music now, which does feel very, very...
Oh, go on, let's each have one. Who's
Andrew Norman is my pick.
That's a great answer, yeah.
First movement of Play, Gran Turismo, and Companion's Guide to Rome. That's got some fast stuff in it.
Some really fast stuff.
Really fast, really dynamic. And it's also, that has what I was talking about earlier with regard to repetition being propulsive.
Yeah.
Like propulsive repetition of finding a little ostinati in the horns, which is powerful and succinct, and if you repeat that 5 times, it feels like you're getting faster, or you're blasting into somewhere. So I think it's got the tempi, it's got the dynamism, it's got the structural change, it's got the textural variety, and it's just got the sense of pace, which, for my money, that's the person at the moment who's writing the most sort of consistent fast music.
That's so interesting, because I would choose another George Lewis. Would be a composer. I mean, not uniformly. George doesn't only write fast music, of course. But it's all those same things. The music has that same playful, improvisatory, not repetitive is the wrong word, but it has that same kind of energy and forcefulness that makes it go.
Yeah.
Is it an American thing?
I mean, it does make sense with the American temperament.
It does.
Fast now.
Fast now. I think
throw loads of money at it.
Yes. Thank God, if only.
thanks, Aaron, for coming on the show and chatting all things fast music. I think to end with, we should each pick a piece of music from any style, any genre, any time period that embodies a sense of speed and pace. So what would you like to leave us with?
Well, I think for me, I would want to, I think, because I'm not sure we got to actually hear it, I'd want to circle back to the Bryn Harrison idea. And this idea of how it feels to perform the music, because I think that is such an interesting thing. So I actually reached out to my friend, longtime collaborator, violinist Sarah Saviette, to ask her what it's like to play that music.
It feels both fast and slow, physically fast and slow at the same time, because being inside of the form feels very slow. But kind of physically fast because it's fast, but also slow because overall it's just long. When I listen to it, it sounds kind of slow though.
Which leads us beautifully to what we should end on, which is Sarah Saviette herself playing a coiled form by Bryn Harrison. We'll end with that. And just before we make it to Bryn Harrison, I think I'd like to play something from an area of music that we haven't really discussed at all, but that is folk music. And obviously Irish folk music gets very fast, very nimble, very lithe, very dexterous. But I think the thing that I would like to leave with is a piece of bluegrass. It's Flats and Scruggs playing the inimitable Foggy Mountain Breakdown. So we'll have that followed by Bryn Harrison's A Coiled Form. And Aaron, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Joss.
You're very welcome. Always a pleasure.